it's lovely to see you all. Thanks for coming, and please welcome Shasti O'Leary Soudant.
That's so good. That's so funny. No, no, I was just kind of like I'm so delighted to see everyone. This is really, really heavy making. And at the same time, like there's this thing that I remember from college when I had a band, where you played friend rock, right? You remember friend rock? Right, so friend rock was basically, you got a band together and you wrote some songs and you played some music and, you recorded a little bit and then you were like, okay, let's play a show, and everybody gets all excited about the show and it's amazing because like you realize how lucky you are because of the people who show up and you know all of them. So there's this kind of wonderful moment where you're like, wow, I love my friends and I'm incredibly grateful for my friends. And then the other moment is, do we suck? Because you don't actually know, right? Like there's sort of this like part of you that's like really psyched that everyone's there, and then there's a part of you that's like, because I'm looking at this, and this sucks. And I know this sucks, right? But this is where something else started, right? And a lot of the time, a lot of what I'm making starts out sucking. Like, seriously starts out sucking. So this is the best example I could find of something that just like royally fucking sucked. Because then I had this I had this really, really grandiose idea, and what John, thank you for that, by the way. That's like, that meant a lot to me that you see that and that you said that. So I'm thinking about, reach out and touch people. And I was trying to figure out different ways of doing this when Heather Pisanti, who at the time was the curator of the Albright-Knox, asked me if I would be interested in being one of the exhibitors, one of the artists for the Nuit Blanche that she was curating up in Toronto 2 years hence. And she asked me, and then she told me the other artists who would be involved, and I... Oh, that's so funny, I was thinking of Tony Conrad. That's totally something he would do. Like, he would walk here, and he would just go... Just because it was funny and bizarre. So she told me the other artists who would be there, Tony Conrad among them, and I had an anxiety attack. And I had this idea that I wanted to reach out and touch people in a way that would make them aware of things like connection and how we misconnect, and it was all very intellectual. And so I was thinking that it would be interesting if they could walk around carrying things that would illuminate them as if they were invisible under normal circumstances. And so the thinking was a little labyrinthine. But what I came up with was this kind of notion of Magritte's men, the guys with the bowlers and the umbrellas, and that they would be stationed all over the city of Toronto, and they would just be kind of silently glowing like ghosts, and because it's something that had happened to our society, that all of a sudden we started being completely engrossed in this thing in our hands that lit us up wherever we were. So at night you always see people when they're looking into their phones, their faces are illuminated. So in the process of that, this was the first place I went, was carry your self-illumination thing, and, you know, and it would be very, like, you know, very sweet and referential and reverential, and then until I finally figured out it sucked. So then I thought, okay, I'll build a portal, and people will go through it, and they will be changed. No, and like how that exactly was going to happen was something that it's like I was kind of fuzzy on the details, but a portal sounded really cool, you know, and I was like, okay, I can build a portal, and have black light, and you know, and then people walk through, and then, shit. All right, so I was like, oh, fuck. This sucks too. And then I was like, well, what do I want to do here? And I started thinking about these ideas of connection and how this notion of viral has become a desirable thing. Contagion, right? So it's like, oh yeah, our marketing is totally going viral, you know, and it's amazing because it's like millions of people, and like we're watching, and it was like, oh my God, like so many people are into it. And this thing, this completely insane part of, I don't know, some sort of unresolved need we have to be in the thing that everybody else is into, is a form of social contagion. And so I started thinking about social contagion. And when I was thinking about social contagion, I started thinking about biology. When I'm thinking about biology, I'm thinking about viruses. And then I'm thinking it's really ironic that we have, in the last 30 years, both been faced with one of the most insidious viruses that we've come up against in the form of AIDS. And that this notion of viral is like somehow something that's desirable. So I started looking at actual viruses and what they look like. And the weird thing about viruses is they look like platonic solids, right? They are these dodecahedrons, icosahedrons, that have little things coming off of them, which are like, you know, protein hooks, and that's how they go and they grab healthy cells. And I started thinking, like, okay, so what if I was to transform myself into a virus? And then it became, what if I transformed other people into a virus? And then how many people exactly, because I'm really bad at math, and that'll come up again later, like how many people could we affect directly? So this became Half-Life. These are my first sketches of, a lot of shit happens when I fall asleep, right? And as I'm just about to wake up, these are the two moments during the day where I tend to have these, like, it's like a vision, or it's an idea, it's something, it's like a thing that is whole and complete when it happens, when I see it in my brain. And I don't think so much that it comes from me, it sometimes feels like it comes through. And so this feeling of, like, you know, what is it, a Zeus and Athena, you know, the big hole in the head, and she jumps out, and there she is, and she's like, back off, motherfucker. And like, that is what happens. These ideas kind of invade my life, and then they sit on my head until I make them, which can be really unpleasant, especially if you don't know what you're doing or you don't know how to solve the problem. So I saw this in my head, and I was trying to figure out, well, how do I make it? And then I'm going to sleep with Ruby one night, and I'm putting you to bed, and we're just kind of dozing, and then all of a sudden I went, oh shit. So I don't know if you can see this. This is kind of hard. This might not be big enough, and I don't know how to do it in this program. So this is this is this laid out in a flat piece, which I cut on a laser. Oh, that's actually not it, right? That's the metal version. Oh, they're a little out of order. So this was the first prototype that I made. And I saw this kind of like these interlocking rings that if you pulled on them and they were made out of metal, that they could extend. And like, I was all excited. I thought I was a genius. Like, seriously, like I thought like, oh my God, I'm so brilliant. Like, and you have to, like, much to your embarrassment, I have those moments where I really think I'm just super smart and isn't this awesome? And then, you know, a couple of years after I do this, I see that, oh, look, Mona Hatoum did exactly the same thing and better. And I was like, shit. But in the meantime, I get to learn this stuff. And so I'm trying things. I'm trying things that have a certain measure of, like, almost guaranteed failure built in, right? And so this became this insane production, which involved 100 people, and involved me making 100 of these helmets out of steel and welding half of them before I realized, oh, you know what? I could have made them with tabs. And it's like really super thin steel, so like welding it is just absolutely fucking impossible. And I'm welding them, and I'm getting really, really good with a really, really light touch. I'm really, really lightweight, but it's still like a royal pain in the ass. I'm like, what was I? Oh God, I'm stupid. All right, so there's like, okay, so you have this aha moment, and then so I make half of them with the welding, and then half of them with the tabs, and then we have them powder coated. And this is the powder coating, right? So all of this stuff is like behind the scenes. Like the pretty stuff is all on the website. You can see all the pretty stuff on the website. It's all finished and polished, and it looks really nice. You know, this is grueling. This is like one at a time. So there's nothing better than when you have this insane pile of work that you've created for yourself, right? There's an absolute element of masochism here. You've created this problem for yourself, and then your friends show up, and they help you, right? So I have this T-shirt that I was going to wear for tonight, and it said, what was it? Something without a net. Flying without a net. Something. Working without a net. Thank you. And it's a total lie. So I couldn't wear it because it was a total lie. So most of you here are part of that net. And it's wonderful that, like, I need help. This shit doesn't happen when you're by yourself. You know, when you're dealing with things that go past a certain point. You know, it's not, you're not by yourself in your studio. You're like, had this unbelievably ridiculous, ambitious idea that you cannot possibly pull off by yourself. And then you need somebody to help you. And this is who shows up, is you guys. And we burned ourselves badly. Oh my God, so many times. So Jana, that's the potato right there. So right there, this is the miracle that Jethro taught me about how to heal yourself from a burn. If you ever burn yourself really badly, strap a potato or an onion cut in half onto wherever you burned yourself. It's a little odd, but it totally works. I still have the scar too. It's nasty. And then where's Paul? Paul's right there. Paul's right there helping me. People were amazing. And we put this insane thing together. Alice, God, I miss Alice. Who misses Alice? I miss Alice so much. So Alice is out she's like out in Portland, in Oregon. She's having a fine old time. But I miss her desperately, and Alice, and this whole thing would not have come together. So, and we got to do it like you. We got to do a performance at the AGO, and it was like really, really cool and super fun. And and then Joanna Gillespie, who, if she had not been there, this would have failed 6 ways from Sunday. Like her ability to organize and procedural knowledge and all of that stuff. I mean, my God. So this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen by yourself. And it's interesting because I used to not feel at all like I don't work well with others. I think probably after having a band when I was in school, the only time collaborating is not really something I did. I mean, I work in publishing, and I design book covers, and there's a lot of input, but mostly I do what I'm told. That's what I do for a living. But when it comes to true collaboration, my first experience with true collaboration were with my grad school mates, my fellow students and colleagues, and they were amazing. And Kyle was my first outside collaboration. And that was an incredible experience. And I went from thinking that I didn't work well with others to it's really worth having yourself involved with other people. It's really worth getting their input. They make the work better. They always make the work better. So this is my lovely daughter giving an interview. She was one of their performers. So this whole experience led to, so I made this thing when I was in grad school. It was a little film called Daisy Chain. And it was this kind of it was a backward understanding of how there is a certain inevitability to events, but only when you look at them in hindsight, right? So it's kind of it's wish fulfillment, it's not real, this idea that oh, this was meant to be. You basically wind up convincing yourself of that in retrospect, because the things that happen are just chaos. But you can use some parts of the chaos to lead to other parts of chaos, and then you pick one piece of chaos and you become obsessed with that piece's shape. So something else comes along, and it's a contest, and somebody wants to put a piece of public art on the side of a building. And I'm still into that shape, right? I think, what can that shape do? I think that shape can do other things. So I start looking what, so, and these were nicknamed the basketball hoops, which was really funny. So this was a failure. I mean, it was an interesting idea. I don't think it would have worked. Knowing now what I know now that I didn't know then about structure, this would have been an incredible failure, so I kind of dodged a bullet by not getting this. But the people who I did this for, who were the Savarino Companies, and they're really, really interesting, marvelous people who are doing really interesting, marvelous things in terms of development. So I became completely obsessed with this shape. I'm what can I do with this shape? It's it can expand. There were two guys who showed up in Toronto, and they were completely amazing. And they were, I would say early 20s, had their entire lives on their backs, those big backpacks that, they carry around when you're not really having a home at the moment. And they showed up, and we were giving the helmets away to the people who wanted to perform. And this is the other thing that I loved, was I was giving the work away. This is super cool. So these two guys show up, and they've got their whole lives on their backs, and they want to participate. And we had some people who didn't show up, and we were like, sure, absolutely. And we figured, yeah, they'd take a helmet, and then, psst. No. They were the most dedicated performers we had. And they stuck to the plaza, which was at Nathan Phillips Square in Toronto. And and I'm stupidly remembering that I didn't actually bring the picture of them and what they did, but they stretched these things out. So on the helmets, so they stretched these things out to where they were 4 feet long and coming out like fire. And I'm looking at this going, because it was a perfect example of somebody taking something that I did and making it so much better than I could have even comprehended it could be. And that was incredibly exciting. And I wanted to continue that, because that's a high. That's something you chase. So these ideas of like making, you know, monumental sculpture and whatnot, kind of starting to get into this idea of public art, and I started experimenting, right? So, and these are things that I experimented with, you know, and I'm thinking about parabolic shapes, and I'm thinking about grace, and I'm thinking about, you know, it's fun. It's fun to be able to play, and, you know, you start to realize, like, you've got these tools. This is really cool. If you shake it, it makes it sound like rain. And it looks really pretty with light coming through it. But it wasn't right for this thing that Savarino was asking for. And they wanted something to do with water. And they were like, Sam Savarino, he's awesome. But he was like, I want a water feature. I'm like, you don't want a water feature? Do you know what that's gonna cost you in maintenance? Like, don't do that. Don't do that. Not on the 3rd floor, right? No, bad things will happen. Let's do this. Let's talk about water. Let's refer to water and other natural forces. Like, let's try and do that. Let's not actually put water in the thing. And so I started thinking about how flow worked, and I'm loving this idea of, you know, perforating metal and stretching things and making it do things. This thing stretches. So it stretches like this. If you pull it, the whole thing stretches, and these kind of like lift, and I should have brought it. But it's like, it's cool. So what I wind up with is that after all this, after just trying to figure things out and like, yeah, that's working, yeah, that's not working, that's interesting, maybe save that for later. In design, we do a lot of save for later. So in like commercial design, you have, I'm working on a book, I'll do between 3 and 6 different comps, different ideas. And they'll pick one, but they'll be like, you know, but we really loved that. Don't forget about that, because we might need that at some point. So that leads to this, which, you know, and then I'm still thinking, like, what am I making? What do I want to make? I'm like thinking like, oh, you know, black clouds with silver linings. Things are getting pretty dark, you know? Maybe we want to start thinking happy thoughts. And no, that's not going to work. No, that sucks. Oh, that's interesting. I will never be able to build that. You know, but it's such an amazing thing. You know, your brain goes through all of these permutations and all kind of like trying to solve, you know, what problem are you trying to solve? What do you say? This is a sound wave. Right? And that sound wave says resurrection. Right? And it's pretty. It's a lovely idea. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make it happen. I mean, wind shear alone will just tear that fucking thing and send it to Montreal. You know, so I have to like, but these are the exercises, right? And then I go, well, you know, I really liked painting. Maybe I should go back to painting. You would be so psyched if that happened. Yeah, no, Jethro's starting to lose patience with the fact that he can't walk through the studio right now because of what's there. So, you know, and you're like, and then I'm like, you paint with love, you paint with like, you know, it's all your, like, oh, your organs are completely, oh, look, it's Ruby. You know, and that's amazing. But in doing that, it's a private experience, all right? So again, more things don't happen. I started thinking about, a friend of mine works, he does, it's kind of complicated, but he's an engineer and he works for a company that they do special effects and they do, they design rides for theme parks and they were doing work for the Electric Daisy Carnival, which is like a big dance, you know, electronic dance music event. And they're like, they're looking for ideas. And I'm like, oh, cool, right? So I start thinking, ooh, let's build a wormhole, right? And I'm like, wormhole. And I'm like, and I engineer this thing. Like, it's completely in my brain. It's totally happening. And not only can you put it somewhere, but you can put it somewhere different in a different way every time you put it somewhere, right? So you like have this experience where you're like going around corners and then, oh, like, woo, and there's like, doom, 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 doom. You know, it's like amazing experience I wanted people to have. And that starts to, I think this is out of order. Oh, yeah, okay. So this idea of experiencing things, I want people to have experiences that fall outside of the normal realm of experiences. That's what I'm hoping for. Anyway, and you know, and like you have seen, the beginnings of things often suck. So this was interesting. So this is Roswell. This is Roswell Cancer Center. And I had the brilliant idea of, let's make giant planet-like things hanging in the area where people get chemotherapy because it'll be pretty to look at. So most of you have probably not had chemotherapy. It's very unpleasant. It makes you very nauseous. And staring at something like that while it's moving is pretty much tantamount to just an order to puke. Right? Now, I have had that experience. And I came up with this idea of like, so, you know, okay, well, maybe you go back to the drawing board. So going back to, so one of the people on the art committee liked the piece that was done at 500 Seneca. And they're like, well, why don't you do something like that? I'm like, well, you know, you don't want to do the same thing again. But I'm thinking about it, and, you know, and it's a beautiful building, but it's very angular. And I started thinking about dandelions and making wishes and what you want to have happen when you walk into a building. There are only 3 reasons you walk into Roswell. You work there, someone you know is sick, or you are sick. That's it. I mean, if you're visiting, okay, but it's really, those are the 3 major reasons. And I was hoping for the first thing to see when you walk into the building to be something hopeful and soft. And so I started thinking about dandelions. They're my favorite flowers. And I started cutting tests. So this was the first cut test for the dandelions. I cut this out of board. And then this is what they wound up looking like. And, you know, it's a different kind of public art. There's not like much, you know, tactile touching. Although there's certainly a desire to touch them when they're up on the wall. And from what I understand, they really do actually accomplish what I was hoping to accomplish, which was, it's called wish field. And you only want one thing to happen, which is you get better. you know? So I don't think any of us really outgrow that. Like, we don't outgrow the wish-wanting, wish-making impulse. So it was fairly successful. It's pretty. And there are worse things that art can be than pretty. And sometimes pretty is enough. Sometimes pretty is everything. And this is pretty. And it kind of works well with the other copper accents in the building. And so this is another petal in the daisy chain. So we go from this, and this was what they gave. I made a whole bunch of these to give to the people who had donated to help build the building, which is a beautiful look. If you're going to get sick, it's really nice to be sick in a nice place. There's nothing more depressing than being sick in a place that just is depressing all by itself. So they do a lot for people who don't have a lot of money. And yeah, it was a pretty great project. I was grateful. So between that and the piece at 500 Seneca, the big weeping wall, that big orange thing that I'm sure everybody is either sick of or seen, or I got a call about possibly working on something architectural, which was really, really exciting. Like that notion that you're building something in cahoots with someone else. Like that collaboration thing, again, is really marvelous. But this notion that what you're contributing to now is not just kind of incidental, but it is integral to the structure of the canvas, of the building, of the thing itself. And also this means the starts to get bigger, things start to get bigger. And so I got brought in to maybe toss some ideas around about building a facade for a building that was being pitched, right? So like, you know, like the public art contest, architecture firms go through the same thing sometimes, where they do a lot of work on spec and they're all competing for one particular project. So in this case, it was a spot in the biomedical quarter on 33 High Street where the Langston Hughes Center is now, or where it was. And they had to maximize floor space, and so, you know, you wind up with something pretty big and blocky. But it was such a graceful form, and it was so beautiful what they were showing me. And I was like, are you sure that you want me to put something on this? Like, because, I mean, I don't want to talk myself out of a job, right? But like, I'm looking at what they're doing, and what they're doing was so beautiful, and it was simple, and it was elegant, and it had this kind of like this concave face to it. And they're like, well, we want you to do something for that face. And I was like, okay, right? So, and I'm thinking while I'm there, trying to figure out, like, well, how do you, because it's something called a brise-soleil, and a brise-soleil is like a sunbreak that you put on a side of a building that's getting way, way, way too much sunlight. And so it will dapple the light. It will, like, you know, like a cucullurus in filmmaking. It'll make the light interesting. And it also protects the building from overheating. And so I'm like thinking about like ways to do this where it lets sunlight in and sunlight out, and maybe it changes depending on your perspective. And and then I started thinking, like, okay, so I'm really into perspective and I think about it a lot. And then I'm like, and so I'm playing with these little things. Now these triangles were interesting, but the building had this beautiful curve to it right here. Right, this kind of face, and I was like, triangles just it didn't work too well. It jutted up against too much, and it was too much of a contrast against what the building was, and so I started playing with this just straight circle where I'd made a little score in it, and then when you fold the paper along that score, you get a moon. I was like, oh, that's kind of pretty. That could work. I'm like, how many could you fill in the building? And so we start thinking about like, well, how would you structure them? And so I started thinking about all of these different ways to utilize the space, to utilize the form, right? And ultimately, what we wound up with was fairly simple and straightforward, which was a grid of three, what was it? It was, hi, Mike. Oh, that's funny. Okay, so somebody here knows what I'm talking about. So it was 900. It was 900 moons. And 900 moons is equal to 72.4 years. And 72.4 years is the length of the average human lifespan. This was a biomedical research building. So the idea for the piece became 900 moons is not enough. And it would have been this, so they got smaller as they went to the center. And so at night, it would glow from the center. You'd be able to see it from really far away. It kind of looked like a full moon made of all of these little moon shapes. And that idea really pleased me. Like, I was really like, and it pleased some other people, which was really great, and trying to, so these were pictures. This is the picture of the presentation that it went in, and and a little history on what the process was. And so it was an incredibly exciting process. But again, it's something that didn't happen, right? You start in one place, you take it to its natural conclusion, and you've got to always be aware that, either, things fail in a variety of different ways. And one of the ways that they can fail is just somebody else did something that they liked more. And it's that simple. And taking that personally is asinine. So you're just like, hot shit, I got to have this amazing experience of imagining for a moment that something I made would be 15 stories high and 125 feet wide. And it was like, shit, that's awesome. And then it goes away and you're like, it's still awesome. It's like, I just, it's a fantastic feeling. So on the strength of that, another petal in the daisy chain. So Mike Tunke, who's from Canon Design, whose project this was, asked me if I would be interested in trying something else. And the trying something else was another building and another facade. And I can't do that thing because it's, that thing is done. It's living in some other parallel universe. And this demanded something else. And so thinking about how to approach this, this is a project for 201 Ellicott. Again, we don't know if it's actually going to happen, but the process of getting there, trying to think the thoughts that get me to a place where I'm thinking about things that are somehow going to provide some kind of benefit to the people who are looking at it. And I'm a big fan of change. So if you've got something that changes as you go by it, as you change your perspective to it, you approach it from the south, it's one color, you pass it, it's another color, you go past it even more, it turns into something else. That idea of metamorphosis, that idea of chrysalis, that idea of something gestating, potential, like all of those. And it's a very, very straightforward shape. It's not very complicated. It's actually incredibly minimal compared to the other ideas I had for the same thing, which were really a little over the top, let's just say. But winding up with something like this and having it turn this into this it becomes a gate. You know, it becomes a gate that changes. It becomes a gate that changes with your relationship to it. If you're approaching it from the east side, you're seeing green, you're seeing newness, you're seeing possibility. If you're approaching from the north, it's two different colors. So all of those things are really like, it's juicy stuff. And so the opportunity to do that is amazing, because if you're thinking in that kind of scale, you're thinking about how the things in the world affect people every day. And given the fact that I've been working in, pretty much mass media, right? So book publishing in the sense of what I do, the covers that I've done up until this point. I mean, I can show you some of them, but it's like learning how to communicate to an incredibly large audience at the same time. And there's this understanding that there's a notion that when you're trying to speak to millions of people at the same time, that you're aiming for the lowest common denominator, right? You're aiming for the what you think the basic idea is that people can apprehend and comprehend. And there's a kind of pejorative aspect that's attached itself to that idea when we talk about art. That, you know, well, who cares about the masses? You know, I actually had someone say that to me once. I was like, you know, I think a lot of people are like, oh, who gives a shit about the masses? I was like, I do. And like, oh no, you just, you know, and I'm like, okay, I'm caring about experiences that people are having without me there because of stuff I make. Whatever they decide it is, whatever they think it is, they're not wrong. Every single thing that they think about my work is correct. It's not up to me. I don't get to decide what other people think or how they react to the work. But what I do have to address, and what's really important, is that I have a sensitivity and an understanding that there is a larger thing at work. There is larger language at work. And in order to speak to as many people as possible, there's a degree of abstraction that has to happen. And the importance of abstraction in not leaving anyone out is absolutely essential, because I am not in this to make people feel stupid. I am not trying to make things that will make people feel like, I don't get it, right? And I understand that there's a definite attraction in the challenge of putting something in front of someone and saying, come on, man, think it through. But if you're gonna put something in the public sphere, there's an aspect to that responsibility that behooves you to speak in the language of the people that you're speaking to. That it is incumbent upon me, if I'm going to make work like this, to not try and force people to speak my language. Because I want them to have a good experience. I want them to have an interesting experience or an unusual experience. But I don't want to make them sad or angry or frustrated. There's not that many ways that you can hone in on something that's going to speak to a multiplicity of people. So this thing has become a challenge. So I came in here, well, okay, so we made this date for tonight like months and months and months and months ago. And I was all excited because, you know, I had this piece coming up, and Aeronaut from the Albright-Knox asked me to be one of the prospective artists for the public art that was going to go in the new train station in the medical school. And I was like beyond thrilled to have that opportunity. And the thinking it through and thinking about what was important about that space and what my job was in that sphere, and then thinking about the context. It's a design problem. I'm trying to solve a design problem. And again, trying to speak to, apparently there's 1 million people traveling through that train station per year, and a lot of repeat visitors, but if I'm gonna put something in front of their faces every fucking day, you want something that's not gonna make them feel like, oh, you know, that there is something kind of silly about what I started thinking about doing. And my initial thought was that I would make a Clostridium, which is a bacteria. And a bacteria that can be really, really dangerous, or other types of Clostridium which are really very healthy, and they're good for the digestive tract. And so I started thinking about beneficial bacteria and happy microbes, and then we went to the Corning Glass Museum, and I started thinking about making a little guy out of glass. And so I drew, they have this form, and you could like draw stuff, and if they like it, they'll make it. And they liked it and made it, and they sent it to me, and it's like this little guy. It's like a little Clostridium bacteria. And I was so excited. I was like, okay, so this is interesting, because we're still kind of talking about contagion, and we're still talking about, you know, contact. But I started thinking about buffalo as a body, like a large body, and the systems that run through it, the transportation systems, are like, these are vascular. These are things that need beneficial bacteria in order to do their jobs. So this is the first thing I came up with, and it sucks. It's way over the top. I mean, you look at this thing, and it goes, you know, and it's like, you can totally imagine whoever is going through this, seeing this every fucking day, is going, Jesus, it's like a visual ice cream truck. You know, make it stop. But I was feeling like colorful and happy. Let's make something colorful and happy. Oh, okay. So this gets presented, and the NFTA loves the color, hates the shape. Right? And I'm up against a couple of other artists who are really, really good. And I have no idea what they're coming up with and what they're doing. All I know is I don't think I'm going to get this. But I did my best, and I built this thing out of paper with what essentially was a 5-month-long migraine. And you would think this would have made the migraine worse, right? But I worked as hard as I could, and it was like an incredibly crazy, crazy thing to put together and design. And I had it like, you know, all laid out, and it was like engineering, and they didn't like the shape, and I was like, oh my God. And so Aaron Ott, who is the curator, said, well, you've got another shot at this. They like the color. And I'm like, okay. And they sort of like the idea, they just don't like the shape. This shape, by the way, and as a designer, I should have glommed to this immediately. This is an omega. Omega means end. You don't want the symbol for end in the medical school. So I think, oh, let's turn it. Oh, look, the big C. I mean, there were so many different ways I screwed myself with this thing. It was kind of hilarious. I was like, well, what about a U? No, this is already, no, you cannot polish a turd. A turd is a turd. So I'm like, fuck, okay, so I have to go back to the drawing board, and I take these pieces, and this is the component, and this is the component. And I take these pieces, and I already know that I can make all of these different shapes with this component. Right, so I've built myself a Lego, which is really, really just super cool for someone who was like as obsessed with Legos as I was. And as an adult, like people would ask me, Shasti, what do you want for your birthday? I want Legos. Nobody listened. So I built myself a Lego, and then I start trying to figure out different things that I can make out of it, and I understand that if there are 16 different ways that this thing can go together, and this was a very elegant shape. I was like, huh, look at that. And I went here, and they were like, no, we want that other thing. That's cool. This is stupid. Cool. Stupid. Cool. Too much. Although I still want to make this. I totally still want to make this. I want to like make loops and shit, like, you know, but so let's just get past this moment. So they actually went for it. And these things are 17 feet long and about yay diameter. And they each have a kind of a distinct personality. And as objects that are going to be in people's space every day, one of the things that I like about it is that they are so different, even though they are the same, that they kind of have personalities. Yet another one of my indispensable. Although this human being, to be absolutely honest, is probably singular the most indispensable person besides my child, because, well, he's a little bit more indispensable than you just because he made you. But yeah, so again, thank God for the net. And this is what it looks inside when it's connected. And this was our test assembly, and I was really, really excited about the test assembly. And that's Zach from the Albright. And super, super excited. 250 pieces total. They are powder coated in 25 different colors. The powder coater looked at me when I told him what I wanted to do, and he was like, really? Okay, we're gonna have a lot left over, because we have to buy it in 25-pound boxes. You're gonna make more of these things? I was like, yeah, I hope so. I think so. I think this is gonna be successful. I think it's gonna work. It's gonna be awesome, right? So me and my band of merry men, who are my absolutely indispensable friends, and my God, you can't do this shit alone. You just can't. So we make these, we put these together. We call him Bilbo. This is Courtney. These people are saving my life on a daily basis. You have no idea. And so I'm putting these things together, and I'm so excited because they're really like big and juicy, and you want to lick them, and they're just so, they feel good, and I'm so excited. And we get to the train station, and I fucked up. And I fucked up in such a kind of a needless way. Right? So you remember that time a little while ago where I said I'm really bad at math? Yeah, okay, so try getting into complex geometry. And I was so excited because I thought that I had solved the first fuck up, right? There was a really, really, really serious problem with this when I made it out of paper. And paper and metal are not the same thing. So when I made this out of paper, I kind of saw it in my head. I figured, okay, so you have a donut, you're gonna section it into 18 separate sections. You know, there's a certain amount of geometry that I did understand. And now that we weren't making the big C anymore, and I had turned this into something else, there was one thing that was really, really important. And that was that the face of this be able to, at any rotation, attach to every other face of this object. So this has to be perfectly round. Now, when you take a dowel, right, you know, like a broom handle, and you cut it on an angle, what happens? Yes, it's an oblong. It is not a circle. It is an ellipse. And when you twist an ellipse against another ellipse, no. No, the only time it's happy is when it's 180 degrees, and that's it. You don't get any other choices. So this is the morning, this is the night before, they're going to laser cut this at Rigidized. And I wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning and go, oh my God! Oh my God, I fucked up! Oh my God. Oh shit. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And then I send a text at 1 o'clock in the morning and then followed by a frantic email saying, stop! Don't cut anything! And so he gets back in touch in the morning and says, okay, so what's going on? And I was like, okay, so you know when you cut a dowel? And he's like, oh, okay, well, we should be able to solve that. I was like, okay, well, I think I know what I need to do. So let me go and talk to Cristiano, who, the sheer number of times that Cristiano has saved my life, I don't know if you know him, but he is completely awesome. And exactly anal enough to do what it is that you need done perfectly. And, you know, and I used to think of myself like, I'm anal. No. So we sit there, and this actually winds up being a really hard problem to solve, because what it is, and it's a subtle difference, this has to be perfectly round, this has to be perfectly round, but the cross section is an oval. So having caught that mistake, I was like full of triumph. I was like, I win, I'm a genius, I've invented a Lego, it's going to be awesome, oh, I can't wait to make all the shapes, right? So Courtney will laugh at this, because the week before we were supposed to put these together, I was like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make a whole bunch of other shapes, and then we're gonna shoot them and take pictures of them. So it'll be, since they're, you know, you document them so they exist, right? So it'll help sell future pieces, and it'll be completely awesome. And Courtney's going, that's a wonderful idea, right? And she knows what insanity this was going to become, and somehow I didn't. And so we wind up at the train station, and I realize, now you can see that this sits at a certain angle, right? So that angle, this from here to here, is 22.5 degrees, half of 45 degrees. And you have 8 sides, and so I thought that if you put these together, then every 8, you would wind up back in the same place. And that would have been true if I had had a parallel face here instead of this angle. So what wound up happening is we get all of the pieces into the station, and I'm thinking, like, all we'll need to do is just kind of turn the last one so it reaches the height that it's supposed. No. There is no turning the last one. Oh, that's Aaron having lunch at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I figured out that around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, surrounded by professional men with large, very expensive equipment, that I had fucked up and that we weren't going to be able to install them because I had not made the piece that would let it sit flush against the ceiling. And so this idea that, like, you know, like, I'm just all full of, like, you know, and the bases made sense, but I just hadn't gone the last mile in making absolutely sure that I knew what I was doing. This is the problem. I don't know what I'm doing. I never know what I'm doing. Shh. That's what I like about this. I like not knowing what I'm doing because I'm not allowed to not know what I'm doing in what I do for a living. Only now we have somehow jumped the shark, and I'm now kind of sort of doing this for a living, and I am not nearly as well informed or educated or experienced in this as I am in the book covers. A book cover, I go, there it is. It's like a perfect little poop. And I know what shape it's going to be and how it's going to smell and what it's going to look like every single time. Because I've been doing it that long. No. So, still learning, right? And having these moments of like, oh my God, right? So you can, you know, for a person who's like prone to anxiety attacks, being surrounded by a dozen people who are costing in just a unbelievable amount of money, and they're all like, they're badass professionals, like the guys. So there's this company called Clark Rigging, right? I wish I had a picture of Mike. Clark Rigging, they're the people who like install lighthouses. You know, they know what they're doing. And he was so gentle with me and so encouraging, and I'm on the verge of tears. Like, I cannot believe I've done this. I cannot believe I've fucked up so massively. And he's telling me a story about his mom. And I'm looking at him, and he just looked at me and he goes, you know, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna figure this out. You're gonna figure this out. You're pretty smart. And you make beautiful things. It's gonna be okay. And with Courtney's help, once again, I solved it. And there it is. And it's just another piece, cut at a different angle. Gonna cut it and bend it and powder coat it, and then there it is. So an hour and 20 minutes, that's not too bad. I realized I had no idea. What, was it longer than that? I'm sorry. I have no idea how much time I take up when I do this. So if anybody, does anybody have any questions about anything? Yeah.
So that building that didn't get built, it was so gorgeous.
The building that didn't get built.
Yes, the one of the, I don't know if the other one.
Yeah, it was 33 High Street. Yeah, it was beautiful.
So, you can't, who owns that idea that you submitted to them? Do they now
I don't
own
know, that's a
that?
good
Are you
question.
not allowed to?
I would say, I mean, I own the idea insofar as it is my intellectual property. I mean, but
Can
the
you apply that elsewhere?
in the right circumstance, maybe. I don't know if an appropriate face or spot or building would ever come up again that would have that same kind of grace and gravity. Like the thing itself, the building itself was so beautiful that like it was important to not make something that would detract from the form, right? So every job has to be, you have to address, you know, it's nice to have stuff like that in your back pocket, but there's, it's not like book publishing, you know? It has to be very specific, yeah. But
You'll build off of that, I mean, as you, I mean, it's a progression.
well, I mean, like
you said, it exists in an alternative reality.
yeah,
but
yeah.
It's not like it's gonna.
And I'm proud of it. Like I'm really, and I'm thrilled that it went as far as it did. It was an incredible experience. It was an incredible learning experience. All of this is an incredible learning experience. And I think just the way that I am temperamentally, I will always be pushing that envelope because I want to be doing the hard thing. The hard thing is what's fun. You know, sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it's like, oh God, I'm going to be sick. You know, like it was last Tuesday. But that is the risk that you run, and you know, and the people involved are more experienced than me, can tell me, hey, this happens all the time. These are real world adjustments. You have to make real world adjustments. So I'm trying not to beat myself up too badly, but at the same time, it was kind of an obvious thing, and I missed it. So to kind of the part of me that walks around going, I am such a genius, you know, it's like, it's just so humbling. And it's like this moment of like, yes, once again, you are not that smart, you know, and it's important to remember that. It's important to be reminded of that, yeah, I'm not that smart. And I work really hard, like possibly a little unsustainably hard lately, but that's where my strength is that I'm like a dog with a bone. So, you know, the rest follows that, hopefully. Anything else? Okay. Oh, yeah.
I don't have a question so much as just wanting to say thank you very much for a great talk.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming.
There's a level of tremendous to the work that you produce, but there's also the additional humbleness of just the human being that you are that resonating with this talk.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really, thank you for coming. I love seeing your faces, and it's too super happy making. So yeah, so we just keep going, and I'm gonna keep fucking up, and we'll see what happens. So if anyone wants to, like, this is not exactly going to be touchable when it's in the station, but it's so juicy, and you can just kind of look at it as an object, I just like touching it because it feels really good. So please be my guest. You're welcome to maul it. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Yes.